First of all, thanks to YourStory for setting this up. And I don't think I could have asked for a better panel for the topic that we have. Right? We've got a partner representing the best VC firm, which is perhaps invested in the maximum companies, startups building global products from India. And we'll share more things which I don't want to give away right now. And we've got a couple of their portfolio companies who executed the global product strategies. So we invite Jishnu Bhattacharjee, Managing Director, Nexus Venture Partners. Jishnu is based in the Silicon Valley, the heart of the action. And I think you're here every quarter, perhaps, right? So very fortunate to have you, speak with the audience, and hopefully there'll be a lot of questions later as well. And let me invite the couple of our superstars from Pune. First of all, let me ask, how many have heard of a company called Druva? Okay, so about half. Okay. So Milind Borate, the co-founder and CTO at Druva, perhaps the best known enterprise software company out of Pune, and also a portfolio company, and Jishnu has been on the board. So this is your sort of investment. How many of you heard of a startup called Arkin, which got acquired by VMware last year? A few. So let me invite Rohit Toshniwal, one of the founders of Arkin. So here we have not just the startup who was able to raise funds from one of the best VCs, but also saw a happy ending in the exit to a very good brand name. So I'm sure we'd love to hear a lot of insights on that side, not just the initial journey, but the how you got the exit side as well. So before we get started, just want a quick raise of hands, just so that we all understand the kind of mix we've got here. So how many of you are building say an enterprise product company, generally in B2B? Okay, so about half. How many of you see global markets as your primary market, say US market, Europe market? Okay, so about a dozen plus. How many of you raised funding already? Okay, very few. Just one last question. Those of you who raise your hands that you're targeting global markets, do you have any co-founder based outside of India, especially in those markets? Okay, I do see a couple of hands. All right. So why don't I just let the three of you just give a quick intro, and then we'll get started with some of the insights.
Thanks everyone for coming. The whole idea here has been, so as Maneesh was saying, that I come in here once every quarter, and it turns out that for Nexus Venture Partners, Pune has been actually, though probably you may not be hearing about us here that much, but we have probably 8-9 companies here, one of the most active cities for us. As I say, I was telling Maneesh that from our lens, the signal to noise ratio in Pune is very high compared to any other city, probably, that's what I would say. So, so it's very special, and from beginning to, in this February for Nexus Venture Partners, we finished our 10 years of making investments. So that way, and from very beginning, we have been funding, been fortunate to be part of the Pune startup ecosystem. A little bit about Nexus Venture Partners for those of you who may not be knowing us that well. Nexus Venture Partners, it's a, we are early stage focused venture capital firm across 4 funds. We are managing over $1 billion. We have 3 offices, one in Bangalore, one in Mumbai, and the other in Silicon Valley. So it's one fund and one team across 2 geographies. And all our investments, the investments that we are funding, we fund I would say, primarily two kinds of investments. One is technology-enabled business and consumer services out of India, and cross-border technology between India and US. And we also have certain companies which are originating in US, but the idea is that the market and the technology that they are building and serving are relevant for the Indian market. So it's a very kind of India-focused venture capital firm. And we have been fortunate over the last 10 years. We have invested in about 80-85 companies, 16 exits so far. So we definitely have been able to kind of get the ecosystem going. And of course, most of our big companies, they are operating I'm very fortunate 5 years ago, to have partnered with Milind and Jaspreet, founders of Druva. And we will, we are continuing the journey and looking forward. So basically, we have seen the different cycles in many different forms, and more than anything else, we are not kind of thesis-driven investors that we, as investors, we have figured out the spaces and we are looking for companies to fill in those spaces. We are very bottom-up investors. At the end of the day, we invest in entrepreneurs, and many of the time we want to make sure that we come into a meeting or when we are approaching entrepreneurs that we are here to learn. And it's very tough to do, but approach everything without a bias. And clearly, our bandwidth are also limited, and we can do so many investments a year. So we try to be and most importantly, we partner with companies where we feel we can add value, because otherwise it's not helpful for the entrepreneurs to work with us. So yeah, with that, I'm very excited to be able to talk to my the entrepreneurs whom I had the opportunity to work with, and together maybe we can share some of our two cents of our collective learning.
So I'm Milind. I co-founded Druva in 2008, and I work as the CTO of Druva. We started here in India, and we initially thought that India is our target market, and we kind of started with that focus. And then after 2 years or so, we figured that fine, we have to address the global market, and then we had to kind of pivot in that direction, right? And that kind of gave us a lot of experience around how it could be done, what are the challenges. And that kind of gives me the right to kind of sit here and give you the gyan on what could be done to build that kind of a global market.
So, Milind, could you share some sort of where Druva is at the moment? Any number of customers or revenue or whatever you can share?
Okay, so
just so people have a context of sort of where Druva has reached now.
Right. So we are in data protection space. That's very core B2B space, right? So backing up data for enterprises primarily, so not really consumer focused. 4,000 plus customers, enterprises of different sizes. So enterprises starting with 100 users or 100 employees working in that enterprise, all the way to enterprises which are hundreds of thousand employees working in that organization. So we have customers ranging from customers who actually back up say 50 or 100 laptops with us, all the way to customers who back up something like 100,000 laptops with us, right? Most of the customer base is in North America, so 75% of the customers actually are from North America, 20% customers in Europe, Middle East, that region, and then 5% customers in Asia Pacific, right? So very global kind of customer base, but primarily North America. 400 plus employees. The entire R&D team operates from India. So the engineering team plus the customer support team, they are in Pune. The marketing team is primarily in Sunnyvale. So about 90-95 people. Sales marketing operating from North America, and then rest of the world. $200 plus million in venture funding so far. Sequoia is one investor. Nexus, of course, major investor. And then recently we announced another major round of investment, $80 million plus investment, just a few weeks back.
So I'm Rohit Toshniwal, and again I'm here to talk more about Arkin. So Arkin we started in 2013, but before that just a little connection about Pune. So I moved to Pune in 2011, and but my relationship with Pune started in 2004. That was the first time that I moved, that I came to Pune. At that time I used to be another startup. So before 2011, I lived in Bay Area almost for 12 years, and I was in another startup before. And in 2004, I came to Pune to start the office over here. That company was later acquired by VMware. That was my first coming into VMware at that time. And then after, as we were growing over here, I mean, someone senior was needed here, the opportunity came, and then in 2011, I came to Pune. In 2013, we started Arkin. Two of my co-founders were in US, in Bay Area. I was based out of here, and we had an exit last year when VMware acquired us. We operate in the networking and security operations space. So this is more for large enterprises, both for their on-premise data center as well as hybrid data center, which is really where a lot of these enterprises are. So that is the space that we operate in. And so a little bit more on the line. So since in 2013, when we started, the large part of the engineering team was based out of here, but our focus from business perspective was always North America. And again, talking about the global company. So when we started, the idea was always to build product in that large enterprise segment, and we realized that the geo that we want to focus on in North America, and that is what we did. All our business we were doing in US. Engineering, a large part or a major part of the engineering was driven out of Pune. And we also had engineering teams in Bay Area as well as in Bangalore as well. And last 1 year has been fantastic for us since we have come to VMware. It's the same product that we built over there, but it has significantly rocketed off. A few hundred customers already at that point in time. And before the exit, by that time we had raised $20 million. Nexus was our lead investor. Jishnu was on our board right from the get-go. We had partnered very, very closely, and as we'll speak, I mean, I think it was a great journey together. Really, really thoroughly enjoyed working together, and as we grew over here. So yeah.
So let's get started. I think given the time constraint, we'll try and cover a few areas: team, technology, market, and funding. In the context of you're trying to build a global product company, being here, right? So we'll try to keep in that context. So let's start with so probably start with you, Jishnu. That if somebody is starting obviously from here, and they believe that the market, the true potential is really in say North America. But a lot of them struggle with this, that should we start with at least going after Indian customers? If so, then at what point we switch to the global customers? So any thoughts on based on your experience of a very large portfolio of these companies? And I'm not sure that there is necessarily a one pattern, but still, if you want to sort of share some insights as to what's the best way to go about that.
So few things. First of all, one thing we have to remember, keep in mind, when we're starting companies here, is like, India, in some sense, for many things in India, there is nothing, the concept of I'm best in India for India won't last. The reason I'm saying that is this, like, if there are certain sectors, let's say, healthcare, financial services, logistics, there are specific infrastructure issues or regulation issues which necessitates a solid localization and building something in India for India. But if it is digital products, whether it is like consumer products like WhatsApp, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or whether it is enterprise products for the compute, storage, networking, or any other things, we are just very comfortable to use outside products as is and at scale. Both are important, as is and at scale. So taking a view that I will build and there are exceptions, but more often than not, I will build a router for say small and medium sized business at 1/5 of the cost than what Cisco can do. It's probably not a sustainable proposition, even if you might get a few customers in India, because how do you kind of build it, and Cisco can kind of flood the market with just $0, right? The product is $0, right? So I think that perspective is very important. That's why when we say that for many things, it's very important to have the global outlook from get-go. Now coming back to the team aspect, and we have two examples here, and I will highlight. So for a company like Druva, and we have several companies like that, they started, and I think when Milind started the company, he may not be necessarily at that point thinking of building a global company, but what he definitely did, and that's I think very 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 crux, it's basically two things. One is there was a global competitiveness. Like, he didn't build a me too. He had this thing in mind that I have to be doing something which is unique, which stands out. Now, of course, and they had a lot of patented technologies in storage and networking optimization, WAN optimization, and all kinds of stuff. Like lot of heavy duty engineering. But the idea was those were needed for resource constrained environment of India, right? And that's how they started. But I got to meet Milind a few years after he started the company, and I was amazed to know that people from 26 countries, if I still remember the number, were swiping their credit cards to use the product without even talking to anybody in the company. So which means that there is a clear barrier to entry and innovation that they did, but B, the product is extremely simple and elegant. It's very very important. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's a famous quote. So that is the key for them. And then gradually as they grew in, and none of the co-founders were, all of them were in India, but gradually as they grew in, it was clear that the market is much bigger outside of India. And that's when we invested, and after that, I still remember Jaspreet, who is the CEO of the company, went in to US, and he started with, at the time when he started, he literally started on the loft of a restaurant with 3 people. And now it's 150 people organization in Sunnyvale, right? So, it's a journey. It has taken one step at a time. But the point I'm making is that the core was to have something which is differentiated, and it's simple, and then let it be. So it was continued. Whereas on the other hand, Arkin, from day one, they had Rohit. It was Rohit. I mean, 3 of them. Rohit's tech brainchild was Rohit's, and he set it up here. Like, the entire engineering team, 100% engineering team was based out of here. But his business partner was actually in US from day one. And of course, it certainly helped that they knew each other for 20 years and could complete each other's sentences. But that was a bonus for them. But I'm saying that it's just, and then the space that they were addressing, I don't think, and they would have even gotten a single customer in India. And these are really sophisticated customers and with sophisticated infrastructure. So they were addressing. So again, depending on what you are doing and how you are approaching, let it evolve, but always keep in mind that in India, for India, may not last too long. And there are examples, we have invested in another company, Scalar, which also had a brief engineering team in Pune. I don't know whether they still have. The first 3 customers were in India, and then they went in, and now most of the company, is the business team is based out of Valley, and their customers are mostly outside of India. So yeah, again, different ways, different mix, and sometimes, you may not be in a position, may not have the luxury to have a co-founder outside of India, but that doesn't mean you can't build a global company. It's just that you have to think through right and not take it for granted. Like, even if you find the Indian customers, have that outlook that, at some point you might have to go outside of India.
So, Milind, if you can, because you were talking some time back when you were talking offline, that you sort of had a certain strategy and certain execution for the first 3 odd years of your journey. And then you had to sort of pivot, share what was that, and so what were the key decisions, and perhaps if certain things failed or certain things could have been done differently, and what were the key learnings? Just briefly, if you can touch on that.
We started in 2008, and as Jishnu said, right, the whole team was here. The product was simple. The only, good thing that we did was we put it, we had a good website, and we spent some time actually doing search engine optimization, right? Not even marketing, just optimization. back then or even now, it's very hard to find good B2B marketing talent in India, right? So you get phenomenal developers, good enough product managers, right? But finding salespeople, again, reasonable salespeople, but marketing talent, absolutely nothing. Right? So with whatever we could do, we're like trying to market in India, go to these partners, customers. What we found was that one, Indian businesses, right, they are not so tech savvy, or they are not like, oh, I want to have the best IT department, right, or I want to like save 10% of my or I want to save 10% of my inventory by kind of building a good IT system in my company. They don't have that kind of a mindset. So they are typically laggards. So if North America is like doing something, it would reach India 2 years, 3 years down the line, right? So for a startup, especially B2B startup, it's difficult to actually market and sell their cutting edge product in India. Indians or Indian businesses, they're also very, very brand sensitive. That was our experience. They would happily buy a product from, say, Veritas or VMware, but they will be very reluctant to buy a product from a startup, even though that product is like, say, 10 times better than what Veritas would do. So that was a learning. We tried that for first 2 years or so. And in those 2 years, what we figured out was that customers from North America, customers from Europe, they would go to our website, they would find that website on Google, they go there, they download the product, they try it out, right, and they come to us and say that we want to buy the product, right, and we didn't have even the process to actually sell the product to them. We didn't know how to invoice them, we didn't know how to get money from them, right, so that's where we actually started, right, and we were still saying that, okay, fine, I mean, we'll try and sell it in India, but it was like selling in North America. In 2010, when we actually got our first VC funding, that's when we actually went and set up our US office. Before that, we are like salespeople sitting here and selling it in North America. So after that, essentially, that's when the actually journey started. So when or the initial few months of a startup, they have to operate from a loft or from a garage, right? So for us, after 2 years, when Jaspreet moved to US, he was like working, or he was like living in his brother's house, right? And then he kind of started working in that. So in a way, we kind of spent those first 2 years just figuring out that fine, the market is not here, it's in North America.
So Rohit, in your case, you're probably fortunate that you're
very different story. So in our case, so again, as Jishnu alluded to, I was very fortunate to start the company with people that I had known for 20 plus years. So both Shiv and Mukul, who were my co-founders, we go a long time back. Shiv, in fact, I had worked also. So all of us went to the same college, which I had worked ever since, and this is our first startup as a co-founder. And so we knew each other extremely well. Right? We had already done startups together. Then after that, I had moved here in India. So in our case, it was very interesting, the space. So I was in VMware, I've always been in networking security space, and that is all that I know. So it was interesting times. I mean, I had moved over here, things were going extremely well, and we would look at what was happening in the market, probably the most exciting times with respect to the changes that was going on. The data center, especially the networking and security, was going through a massive change over there. And we used to chat often and exchange notes, etc. And we said, it's not time to do something over here. And given we were so close to each other, in our case, I don't think that idea ever came that let's build something for here. And again, it was driven by where the market was. It was changing so fast. Not all of these technologies and data center changes that were going on were adopted. And clearly the leaders of who were showing the way, everyone who was in the US at that time. And for us, it was a very obvious choice that these are the set of people that we have to go after. Yes, we had learned earlier, I mean, building other products, etc. And very rightly, as Milind pointed out, that in the space that we were operating in, and we were not operating in the credit card space. We were talking about these large enterprises or commercial with 5,000 or more people running at least 1,000 servers or more kind of it. So this was the space that we were going after. So for us, that never came. But as Jishnu pointed, it was always to build the best product. I mean, we were looking at the landscape. So in our case, when we started the journey, and Mukul comes from the distributed system space, Shiv and I come from this data center space kind of it. And we said, let's go and figure out what we want to do. So when we left what we were doing, at that time we had not decided what we wanted to. And when we left, we had thought that we'll give ourselves like 6 to 9 months. To figure out what needs to happen. Luckily, things happened much faster.
So how did you fund the initial US?
So Mukul and Shiv were living there, and whenever I would travel, I will live in one of their houses. So all food and lodging paid for, all best of the worlds. So that is what we do, and again that was another thing that all of us had worked earlier, and we said that okay, for 6 to 9 months we'll fund whatever is necessary out of ourselves. I mean, that was the original idea, and so things have been going well. So this is what we had thought, and so we started working on it, meeting a lot of people. It took us quite a bit of time to start saying that we as in VMware to get back to, and now I'm getting to the other side where I say we as in Arkin, and I'm trying to get back to we as in VMware. So it took some time and a lot of learning, and that is when we got introduced to Jishnu. And I still remember the key thing over there was, I remember we met with Jishnu, and then we met with Naren. We were also meeting with some other people. So originally it started with, we took some feedback from some of the other people. We had a lot of respect for, just to see that these initial thoughts that we had, is that even fundable or not fundable? And we got very positive feedback, and we had never thought of raising seed funding. We always thought we'll start with Series A funding only, so that at least we raise enough money for 2 years. Right, that was the whole idea, because you don't want to be in the perpetual business of raising money, right? So we met with a few people. Few people said, okay, we'll be interested in seed funding also, but we were not so. And I remember meeting with Jishnu, Cupertino restaurant over there. My flight was supposed to be 3 hours later. We meet with him, we come out of the door, all of us are thinking what to do, and I say, okay, I'm not taking the flight. So we didn't do that, and after that we met with Naren. I think the clincher that is still in my head was, Naren and Jishnu said, guys, we don't know what you're doing, but we think you guys know what you're doing, and this would be an interesting thing, and we are willing to bet on you. I think that always stayed with me, and because it was here, people were not necessarily taking sort of a Excel sort of an approach over here. How much money you need for this much time? How much can you do it at that time? It was more like, okay, looks interesting. Looks like what you guys are saying. I mean, yes, there were a lot of open questions back then when we started, but clearly there was this team which was willing to fund the team which has come over there. So it's like 3 people and a PowerPoint, right? Yes, there is credibility that you build as you work, and I'm sure.
So I think the common thread I'm getting from all 3 of you, the takeaway, is that even on day 1, having the ambition to build a globally competitive product, right? And being able to articulate or having the clarity to demonstrate that, look, this is a team who can get there, right? Obviously on day 1, you don't have the resources to build that magic thing, right? But still as an investor, right, clearly without resources, you can't build a globally competitive product. What do you look for, for your first, writing that first small check or whatever the amount may be? Rohit already mentioned that in his case, having that clarity that even though you probably didn't have that conviction of what is that, but you had conviction that these guys know what that is. But you want to just share a little more?
Yeah, he articulated it very, very well. And of course this is the most common question that as an investor we get asked, right? What do you look for? What makes you write, checks, and why don't you write most often, right? So I would say that, often, probably maybe one of the common mistakes entrepreneurs do is that when they get to build something, get to start a company, first they start with building. Now, of course, you'll have to build, but who are you building it for? What you are building? What problem you are solving? There is a lot of good thinking that needs to go in, and for that, you have to discover. I mean, you have to, of course, understand. Start from your understanding, but also kind of then try to discover things and all. So, what we look for is, if there is one most important thing that you look for, is clarity of thoughts on why, what, and how. Now, that doesn't mean that you have nailed everything, but the way it will come to you, come out, like when I am talking to the entrepreneur, would give us the conviction. And given that we are working with entrepreneurs, of course you can say that some sort of pattern matching, some sort of understanding. We get that feeling, like internally, I need to truly feel within myself that what that person is saying, they truly understand and they have thought through a lot of things. And we also know that this thinking will evolve. Many of the times when we fund and then we look back after 2 years, things have changed quite a bit. But that's okay. At any point of time, people are working with insufficient information, and with that, if they are being able to come across, and of course the team has to be complementary. What they are saying, they need to have the capability to be able to do it. So that is the number one thing. And we have funded even like pre-PowerPoint entrepreneurs. Forget about product. Product will come up later, right? And then kind of and then of course on the other hand of the spectrum, of course, we started working with Milind and just with little later, the first round was done by someone else, and then we came in 2011, and at that time, they already had a product which was selling. So there are spectrums of different. One is like thoughts and what do you want to do, how do you do, and the other is real product with real market traction. So somewhere it falls in between. And also a related point is quantum of check, and that varies quite a bit. For Arkin's thing, and rightfully as Rohit said, they decided that this is a product, different kind of product, addressing very large customers. So you may not be able to do much with seed funding. And sometimes actually, another thing what happens is prototype building is waste of time. Because you might do prototype, most of the cases you do prototype, that will have to be undone. As an investor, I never look for prototype, because just looking at prototype, what do we do? I am not capable enough to get to the bit level and understand what they're doing. And at least I know that there are certain things with prototype you can do, but most of the things with prototype you cannot. So you have to kind of undo it, and it might be a waste of time and money. So yeah, it's a spectrum again, but clarity of thoughts is paramount.
So Milind, when you were raising your first round, did your sales projections include a lot of North America revenue, or how did that look?
So not really, right? So essentially, when it's kind of becoming how to pitch to a VC kind of a talk, but so typically, right? So when we had to pitch to VCs first time, what we are most scared about was this business model question, right? So what's the business model, right? And if we put like $1 million coming in next year, that looks too small. If we put like $10 million coming in next year, we are not sure, whether we can actually do it. Right? So what we learned from that experience was, again, the same thing. When somebody is asking you what's your business model, they just want to know whether you have any plans of actually selling it to someone and getting money, or you're just building it because you like to build it. Right? So whether there's a market, whether you have thought about the market. That was essentially the experience, and we didn't really. By that time, we had figured out that the market is in North America, right? So we had actually most of our sales, even in the first year, most of our actually sales were happening outside of India. So by that time, we had figured that out, and our business model and projections did have our focus on North, though it was not like say 95-5 as it's happening right now, but like 60-40% kind of a split that we're actually showing between North America and India.
Okay, great. So let's move a little further. That you had the clarity of thought building the globally competitive product, you were able to raise at least some funds to do justice to building the product. And in Rohit, your case from day one, and in your case, Milind, in like third year or so, is one co-founder decided to move to where the market is, right? How did you then start building your go-to-market strategy? And to what extent it was driven from the feet on the ground in those markets versus the, say, support from here? And any initial failures, any learnings, and sort of what would you advise today? Because again, things have changed, right? What perhaps happened in 2012 may not necessarily be very relevant today. So, but you guys, still selling. So, if you can share sort of today, what would you advise for your kind of product?
Well, I can take it. In our case, because it was starting in the US for the US kind of head. So one thing we learned very clearly. So I spent a lot of time in the US. Sometimes I look back and I don't realize how I did it, but see, almost I flew maybe 400,000 miles in the 3 years over there, and spending a lot of time there. And regarding our go-to-market, definitely the customer shaped it. I mean, when we started, one of the very unique things now, looking hindsight, what we did is, there were a lot of companies which are trying to come in. It was an interesting space, tectonic shifts happening, people were coming in and different people trying to do it. One thing that turned out very well was, no one did both networking and security so well together. There were networking companies and there were security companies. In our case, we did both. And the way we got some of these customers were, again, Shiv and I were at VMware earlier, and we knew all the marquee customers in this space because there were only a handful of them. And we figured ways to get connections to them or whatever it takes to reach to those customers. And we worked very closely with them. I mean, our first account that we were working was a large gaming companies in Southern California. We spent the guy, and one thing that worked really to our advantages, and I think maybe it's the DNA that we too grew up with in different startups, etc. We had always been very close to customers. I mean, in our earlier startups also and here also. So sort of we were able to empathize with what they want extremely well. I still remember the guy who was there, who was working with us. He still have great relationships. He has moved through different companies and now he is at VMware, and he still loves us. At that time, we were focusing purely on networking and we made great strides with them. And then we started working with large coffee company, and there we realized first time we went over there, and in the first meeting, it became apparent that that might not be that interesting for them. And what is more interesting or compelling would be on the security side. And we said that in next 1 month, we are going to do it. I mean, so with respect to our go-to-market as to the space we are doing, because the space was in such a flux that was going on, that we were watching it very closely. We were looking at the market leaders, learning from them, and sort of projecting in the future as to what is going to be needed.
So you're still trying to figure out the product market fit.
Yes, and this is where I will also say, like our board really come in extremely. I still remember, right, Jishnu, month after month question, but what is your story, right? How do you make it simple? How do you make it concise? So that when you talk to people, that they get what you're doing. So it did take us quite a lot of work, etc., to get it to a point where we go in and customers really love us. So we evolved with how things were going, but I think what really worked very well for us is we had the feet on the ground. Every single engagement I visited personally over there. So wherever it was in the US. Taking flights, going and meeting with the person, being in the room, etc.
You also have strategic channels, like were you leveraging any of the larger companies' customer base to sort of?
No, we didn't. So in some ways our past connections, right? So we knew a lot of these customers and the people over there, etc. So we did, and also we used a lot of our relationships also in different spaces, getting introductions, etc., and going to them, but no to the channel kind of a route, because it was a little too early. No one had done what we were doing, and it was kind of ahead, almost saying that no, 2 years from now this thing is going to be needed, looking at how things are going on.
For us, basically both Jaspreet and I had Veritas background. So to a large extent, the product requirements, those were kind of clear to us. And unlike Arkin, it was not a completely new space, that it was not a new market that we were venturing into. The market for, say, user data backup that existed, it was kind of taking up back then because of the proliferation of laptops, and after that, like mobile phone, tablets. The amount of data that kind of used to sit on end user device, that kind of started growing up, right? So market started opening up back then, but the product requirements were kind of clear to us, so we didn't really need to interact a lot with the customers to figure out the initial set of product requirements at least. So the initial product was actually built without even a product manager on board as such, right? So just Preet and me, we kind of just defined the product, built it here. What happened was reaching out to the market, the GTM, right? That became the challenge for us. So the product got built, and then how do you market it? How do you build a sales team? How do you reach out to the partners? So that's something that we couldn't do sitting here in India. That. And then, as I said, the first 2 years we kind of they were kind of lost in terms of the GTM motion for the product. And the actual GTM motion had started when actually just moved there, and he had the first couple of employees. That's when the GTM motion started.
And that was to do the marketing, the digital marketing?
That was essentially, so the first 2 years are like critical for the initial brand building for the company, right? So for us it started when, and it was, we are not really creating the market, it was more of like telling the customers that we are there, we have a product which can actually solve your problem. So customer actually knew that the product exists, they knew it needs to be solved. It's just that, like going out to them and telling them that we have the best solution for your problem. That initial brand building gets started back out then. The search engine optimization, search engine marketing, that kind of process that we could do actually sitting here, that didn't really know, that didn't really need so much of presence in that actual geo as such. But the brand awareness part to an extent started.
Right. So Rohit, in your case it was largely direct sales, and you, the team kind of had the right connects in that customer base from your prior history and all. And Milind, in your case, it was a lot more of the SEO driven sort of push.
Yeah, in our case it's like a very, very horizontal market. So
Great.
kind of.
So the question I have is for you, Jishnu, that actually there are two questions. You can answer any order. So one is, when you were initially betting on the team, right? Obviously you saw the conviction to create a globally competitive product, right? And you saw the clarity in their mind, both sides. To what extent you evaluated their ability to do sales? And sorry, and the second part was that as a board member, how much do you really interact or spend time on to helping in that initial sales or channel or whatever? Because for most startups, that's
So just one comment, right? So the board, right, they take the product for granted.
That's the bet on the team, right? The product will be there.
Right, and then the whole focus is on, okay, I mean, how can you sell it, right? Can you actually make money out of this?
Very well.
Later Milind shared with me that how many times the product got re-architected when we were selling in the market and making money. I didn't know, but one a very important point. I think the question that you're asking is very important. One thing which is really important, and more so for enterprise startups, actually it's true for any, the founders who need to have what you call sales DNA. Now, sales DNA doesn't really mean that they would need to kind of go through the entire motion and be able to really close a deal, because there are certain kind of tactical skills that is needed. and that needs to be complemented by somewhere else. But that sales DNA, because especially when you are building an enterprise product, and there is something, whether it's for an existing market or it is creating a new market, there is always something new that you are coming in. It's very difficult initially to be able to rely on a sales guy, so to say, right? So always it happens, and we definitely encourage our entrepreneurs to be able to connect deeply with the initial customers themselves, no matter what. Like for them, yes, in some cases they will have prior connects like Arkins, or in other cases, like entrepreneurs are very resourceful. Of course, we are also there from that angle. We facilitate some warm introductions when the time is right. But that is very important, and also like we would say for most of our companies, if not 100%, channel comes a lot later. And many of these newer companies, with SI partners or channel, you won't be able to do much, because SI partners or channels, they remember their key thing is relationship with their customers. They are not going to push your product. And also for them to fathom exactly what you are doing is very, very difficult. Like in Druva, we have started channel, now we do channel. But for a long time, it was direct, and it had to be direct. Arkin, no question of channel. I mean, now of course, part of VMware, I'm pretty sure they're looking at. So that is the part. And specifically, tactically, I think after a certain point, if it is like really enterprise company and where you are dealing with maybe one or two big customers, you first engage with, and then at the right time we'll get in sales help. Probably it will start with maybe one account executive first, and then gradually kind of building VP sales. And usually it starts with reps, and then you bring in VP sales. But that sales DNA is very important.
I'll just add one couple of points over here. One, definitely on getting these connects, etc. Like, I was amazed with how Shiv would somehow figure these things out. Right? We'd go where we'll get to know, hey, this meeting is happening over here. We'll just show up that. So Shiv is my CEO, my co-founder, and we'll figure out ways to run into these people. And for us, so that was amazing, and you do that. And also another thing is we did some sort of strategic partner kind of relationship. In fact, with VMware, we developed a relationship where they would start building our product as well. And that was for various market forces, right? Customers needed it, there was nothing like that. And that really helped us. And customers turned out to be great references for us. It was so many times it happened that there is some other meeting happening, and unknown to us, Arkin is being discussed in that customer meeting. Someone raising their hand, I'm using this product, really great, why don't try, and that is how we got most of our early engagement.
One very important point Rohit mentions is strategic partnership. That actually is very different than system integrators or channel. And strategic partnership, even for Arkin, it took quite a bit of time. Yes. Even though they knew VMware and all, it took like more than 18 months probably to even get to something significant. I mean, we have at Druva, we have fantastic partnership with AWS, but it has taken like lot to kind of get there. But I think that is something it's worthwhile for companies to keep in mind, that who would be your, I don't know, a partner of sorts with whom you start working, and it will take time. First you have to bring in customers to them. There has to be joint efforts. Like best thing is for any of these things, best thing is you bring customers to your partner. I mean, you have to do the hard work and gradually kind of really understand where are the strategic gaps there. How do I fill in? How do I kind of like be a value added offering here, and then have customers create the pull. The best intro to a partner is not through a board member, not through anything, but actually through a customer. So all these these are just 101s, I guess, but that's how it works, brick by brick, no shortcut.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'll get to sort of the last topic, which I would imagine that as an investor, you would certainly be thinking even before you write a check, which is what is the exit strategy, right? Founders may not necessarily look to sell, but VC wants an exit at some point for at least their stake. So to what extent at that early stage when you're investing in somebody, you think about the potential kind of exit, and How does that, do you also then try to gauge the founders, mindset alignment with that, or just, how you think about exit?
So yeah, we definitely have to think of exit, given that that's the business we are in, to make returns for our partners. But it's very, very important. It's like very subtle, and I will try to communicate. When we are looking at companies, we really don't think of exit at the time, because the idea is that you are creating value here, and it becomes very difficult to fast forward and see that I mean, maybe we'll first of all, we never ever expect from entrepreneurs to say that this will be the exit strategy. We are not expecting that, and we don't want them to think about exit, because that's the you don't even know what you are clearly building. You don't know the product market fit. How can you ever even do any justice to that thinking, right? Now, as a firm, as an investor, of course, I will have among the 4 compartments or 5 compartments in my head as I am evaluating the opportunity. I will probably have in one compartment some exit thinking, but that's not really the core that we are doing. Now, what happens is that as we are progressing in the company, right? As a board member, we have our fiduciary duty, and of course, as an investor, I have my fiduciary duty to my investors. I think and it happens gradually. We think through what are the paths the company would take, and sometimes the answer might be that an exit would be in the best interest of everyone, and maybe the nature of the product is such that that partnership with the partner will actually let the product vision to be fulfilled the best way, right? And in other cases, you kind of take a call as a board that hey, the right idea would be to building things out. Now having said that, the best exits, like all the, at least we had several experiences ourselves as a firm, are always unsolicited. So the way it works is that the exit, the interest has to be generated unsolicited. You can then run a process, and probably that will be a matter of who would be eventually be able to sell and the price point at which you will sell. But it's not the right practice to be able to kind of go around and peddle the company, because that doesn't really lead to an outcome. Like as it is always said that companies are bought, not sold. I mean, okay, you have to do your part, and there is a process to it. So I mean, but things, usually good things happen unsolicited.
So, Rohit, you
No,
went through.
absolutely agree with everything Jishnu said here. So this question, I mean, this is the most common question I get asked. You had an exit acquired by VMware earlier. When you started, did you already think about it? So absolutely no. In fact, when we started, I mean, this was not even the thought in our mind, and clearly we started to do something in the data center space, which is what we understood well. And again, as we were going through the journey, I mean, we were looking at various changes which were happening. For example, we were looking at OpenStack kind of things at that time. We were trying to partner with like big open source software company that Nexus introduced us to. So we were trying, and the idea was to genuinely build a large product and a large customer base. And on the question of exit, and I think it was not like it is the time to do it. It was a very difficult decision. I mean, here there was a product which is seeing very good traction. We are going to the customers, whoever is using it is really loving it. And I still remember those conversations. I mean, where the choices for us are raise a very large round, build a big sales team and see it, or see whether there is a partner which can do it, like and like Jishnu said, how do you do it? And it's really the product which is speaking. In our case, it was customers, right? We are getting customers from customer references, customer going to these vendors and saying that this is something that we need over here. And then, I mean, we already developed strategic sales kind of relationships with them. And when things started happening, and that time you have to evaluate where is it, and we thought about it, where the product is. And if you were to pick like one sales team that can really take the product where it belongs, and the answer at that time, because VMware is the market leader in this space, it naturally fit and in the space that we were. And in fact, it was the VMware sales team already selling our stuff, and that seemed like a very, very natural marriage. And customers needed the product, we needed the sales team, and it was not like let's do it kind of it. I mean, all these decisions were thought through including how do we make it even bigger, etc. And just given all the points Jishnu said, it looked like a great thing for everyone, and it has shown. Like in 1 year, the product is the same product, like Milind was earlier saying, where we were earlier taking like 6 to 9 months to close, right, your company, and typically we would go in, the technical part of it or the need part of it will get satisfied very quickly. And then there is this long cycle which starts where the person who wants to buy is ready to, but then he has to convince everyone else around it. Where will the budget come from? Your small company, the paperwork, etc. won't happen. So that really was, and it has gone great.
Perfect. And so just sort of the closing comments from you, Milind, and don't mean to put you on the spot, but you mentioned you've raised a very big round recently. What's going in the thought process, next 2 years, sort of what do you expect?
IPOs from
Yeah, I didn't want to put words in his mouth.
So we came to that juncture, so the juncture that Rohit mentioned, so we came to that juncture 2 years back. And as Jishnu said, right, so unsolicited offer from someone to occur, and similar discussions, and what we thought was essentially the market is just opening up, right? There's like a huge opportunity in front of us, and if we execute on it, both in terms of like better product, more features, and also in terms of like reaching out to that market. So what we are seeing that time and what we see now is essentially that huge shift to cloud, right? Huge shift to public cloud. And we said that no, I mean, if we stay put, we could actually make a huge difference here. And kind of being a little philosophical here, when it kind of comes to the question of exit or the destination, we were like Steve Jobs, he said the same thing, and we were like saying Shri Krishna, he said the same thing. Essentially, do what you like to do what you believe in, right? And then everything else follows, right? So even right now, the way we are looking at it, and essentially the board is like completely with us, is do the right thing, right? Just figure out what's the big problem for the customer, solve it, and everything else will follow. So that's what we are doing right now, and IP will follow, but we are not like that. That's not what. That's not the target. That's not the goal. The goal is to actually solve a customer problem, right? And essentially.
But we are very proud to have that. It is a company who at least has the potential to get to an IPO, right? With a global product and not just an India sort of market. So fantastic. So let me just quickly summarize at least a few key points that I got from three of you, and then if you want to add to that, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So clearly starts with having the great ambition of building a globally competitive product, right? Followed by the being able to articulate and show the clarity of thought and how we are going to get there. Right? One of the key things that I heard from this last 1 hour conversation, that it's important to at least somebody in your core team to be close to where your market is. Right? That doesn't mean you need to shift the entire operations, etc. But without being close to your key customers, it gets difficult to get to that product market fit and even to build that sales velocity. Right? Sales DNA, I think that's a great term, and I think that very clearly articulates that that's probably the most important part, right? We see a lot of teams where they have the great ability to build a product, but if the sales DNA is not there, they struggle, right? And it's very difficult to just rely on hiring a salesperson to go and do the magic. It just doesn't happen. Building some strategic partners can be of a lot of value. Sometimes it may depend on the type of solution and market, but generally strategic partners could be of great value. And then of course, last but not the least, finding an investor who also understands the space. Right? And I'll expand on that. right investors who understand the space, right, is able to get the conviction on the team and make the bet. Right? If investor doesn't have that understanding, experience, or knowledge, they'll first ask, okay, I need the right team. Once you have the right team, they'll okay, now show me the product. Once you show the product, okay, show me the traction, right? It's never ending, right? And I think we hear this from a lot of entrepreneurs that that milestone keeps moving and the check never comes, right? So again, that's not a generic thing, but generally, the right investors will be able to make the bet, perhaps much faster. Any of the points that I may have missed?
No, very, very, very well said. One thing you made a comment that
Sir, mic,
again,
please.
expanding on
Thank you.
sales DNA. I mean, I would say the other way of looking at it is this, right? When you are building a company, the owner's buck stops at you. So in a sense that the mindset is very different. Like I have often seen it more so in Indian entrepreneurs. Then they will say, oh, for selling, I will hire a sales guy, or for marketing, a marketing guy can do it. It's about as I always say, the founders would need to spark the fire. Executives add fuel to the fire. So that thing, right? At the end of the day, you have to say that, okay, this is the team, this is our team, this is what we build, and we will build. Like that ownership, it just goes very deeply that I'm owning it, which means that whatever needs to be done, I will do it, and that will mean that I'll have to get the right person who is better than me. But I will tell you that you will never be able to do that if you truly don't believe and appreciate that I would need to market it, or I would need to really sell, and it shows up, right? The way entrepreneurs are selling to us, we are looking at. Of course, sales is very different. One is like your conviction is coming out. The other is sometimes entrepreneurs are working as used car salesmen. So there are like a lot of these nuances. That's why sometimes people say that what are the criteria on which you guys want? It's very, very subjective. So
great. So let's open up for Q&A.
My name is Nikhil Punde. I have a sports technology company called Spark Sports Technology, and we are into essentially athlete performance management solution and player development. So it's a B2B SaaS model. My question is essentially, could you talk a bit about, and this is for the entire panel, the initial process where you're educating the market, right? You're educating the customer on the product, right? Whether, as you mentioned, that they may not be as comfortable with technology, or there may be some inertia for them to upgrade to a better product. So, and I'm kind of standing at that
Brief
crossroad. Yeah. So, how did you go about that process in terms of educating the market and sort of bringing them up to speed that they really need your product?
So there's a great book called Crossing the Chasm, right? I don't know whether you have read that book, but in any market, what happens is any product, right? It's first bought by the enthusiasts, right? And whenever you're launching a product, you have to figure out how do I reach out to those enthusiasts? Where will I find those guys who would be very interested in trying out new things? So you start there, and then as you grow, the sales tactic changes. But if you're asking about the first customers, essentially you have to figure out how do you reach the enthusiasts. So in our case, or a lot of times in the foundation tech space, if we reach out to the right kind of bloggers, right, then the enthusiasts in that space typically read those bloggers. So we reach out to these bloggers, they understand the tech, they put it up in their blogs, and it kind of starts there.
Very rightly said. And in our case also, it is reaching out to these specific companies and finding the evangelists within these companies, because the space is changing so fast and they are really bought into the space itself. Now you come in and you say, this is a better way of doing what you are doing over here. So that is what really worked with us. And also, once you get one of these, in our case, it was the word of mouth, right? These people who are really, really bought into it, evangelists, really want to show the world how to do things. they talk to each other, and then they bring up, by the way, this company over here, they are trying to do this, and that is how things really kickstart for us.
So by the way, I highly recommend the book Milind mentioned, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. A wonderful book for especially this domain.
Should
Yeah,
be made a must read, I think.
Yeah,
for everyone.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I can count. Amit Panspe, Pune Tech. I think the two very interesting points were made, one by Jishnu and one by Milind, about Jishnu's talking about the sales DNA and Milind mentioning about lack of marketing expertise. I think those 2 points are probably two most important takeaways for me. I think specifically in the context of startups, most companies don't understand the value of marketing, especially B2B. And so I wanted to tie those two things together, and maybe both of you could answer it. How do you go about finding the right marketing people? And do founders even understand the difference between the two? And that's a big challenge in India. I think anything you can add to that, because I think that's a real problem, and I think some amount of education is needed there.
So again, essentially, whenever we are hiring, right, as founders, two things become important. Again, that sales DNA becomes important. So we should be able to like sell our vision to anybody who's coming on board, right? And then the second thing that becomes important is whether that person, right, whether it's a salesperson, whether it's a product manager, right, whether he kind of gets excited by that vision, whether he gets it. And that's something that we look out like while getting anybody on board, right? And then typically, whenever I look at any marketing person, what I try to do is whether that person can actually listen from me, understand it, and actually sell it back to me. How is he forming that message? How is he able to articulate it in a much crisper, much more, much more simpler form, right? That after hearing that, I myself feel that, wow, I mean, that's something that I would kind of want to buy into. So when I talk to sales guys or marketing guys, typically I kind of follow a very, very commonsensical kind of approach while talking to those guys. So not like a very methodical way I could prescribe here. Maybe Jishnu has a more.
Especially Jishnu, from your experience of a very large portfolio set.
So, I thanks Amit for asking this question. It's extremely like, if there is one thing that is holding Indian startups back, is this, the fact that marketing is as important, if not more important than building the product. And I would say, if I both of course, if I look across our portfolio companies, I would say the toughest hire is probably VP marketing, even more than VP sales, because if you look at marketing is probably the most fast evolving space, right? As I say, marketing is a combination of two M's nowadays, message and math. Because if you look at the entire lead gen funnel, everything, this is very, very analytics driven. In terms of like, how things are coming in, how do I go about proceeding this, how much I will put it in SEO, SEM and all that. So that's the math part of it. And before that comes in the messaging part. By message, I combine the entire product positioning, messaging, reach out, how do you kind of reach out and all that. So that the reason it is tough, because the person need to have a very good understanding of both the product and the market. Then only you'll be able to figure out the positioning, and from positioning, messaging will follow. And it's very, very difficult, and that's why the appreciation from the founders is so important, that this is such a core activity. Otherwise, for the founders, even to understand who they will hire becomes very difficult. And by the way, this is one thing I would say, we again look for that DNA, that's whether that spark is there. But this, I think, we as board members and VCs should be helping the founders a lot, because at the end of the day, they are good at what they're good at, and most of the times they will come from deep product and technology background. So, some of those we get heavily involved, but VP marketing is very difficult to hire. And likewise for VP sales, like, best salespeople, I mean, I feel that, best salespeople are actually best listeners. I mean, that's one thing you can tell whether you could hire or not. Like, if the person spends most of the time just like, talking and selling themselves, that's probably not the right person. Because, if you don't listen, you don't know how to sell. Because that's where, marketing comes in with a broader kind of message and strategy, and sales is like, how do you make that sales happen? So you have to look eye to eye very clearly with the person across the table if you're selling, let's say, in person, and try to just solve that person's problem and give them the confidence that you are here for them, right? So this kind of DNAs would need to come in, but both are very difficult. Marketing especially is extremely difficult. Even so in Valley and let alone in India. And we want to do more in kind of like increasing the awareness here. I think over the last 10 years that we are tracking the market, like Nexus just finished 10th year in February. I do see that the quality of thinking has improved, but I think as the Indian startup ecosystem, we have room to do better.
My understanding is it's very hard to find a marketing person who can do both messaging and lead gen. The person who understands the soft part of it and understands the numbers, right? So if you have like choice between a guy who understands the soft part of it, messaging part of it, versus the numbers, right? I mean, which one do you pick?
Yeah, so that's also a very interesting question. So I would say two things, right? One is, of course, you can't expect, very seldom you will get a person who is master in both. But as a marketing leader, they would need to appreciate both. And one they will be able to handle, the other they will be able to hire for. Now, based on, like, I would say for our company like Druva, or also for Arcane, the best DNA would be probably product, from the product side, because that's where kind of like, you need in and you kind of fill in the role for lead gen. I mean, you need to have appreciation, you need to have the ability to find the right person. But there are other companies, let's say, many kind of functional SaaS companies, right, where everything is driven by metrics. Like, you have to be meticulous on numbers and the entire go-to-market motion. There probably you should look for a leader who is like just really on top of kind of like, the entire lead gen mechanics. So.
Hello everyone, I am Anand Muglikar, CEO of Stomatobot Technologies. We basically automate CCTV surveillance for proactive mobile alerts in near real time. In short, it's your watchman who never sleeps. So just today I went to another event and I got an advice that marketing my kind of product or getting sales in my kind of product in the Indian market is not really easy. So I was suggested to try doing it for overseas market first. So I just wanted to ask how easy or difficult it will be without setting up a base to do SaaS sales abroad, or what could be done without setting up a base, because it would be too early for us.
Okay, I can take a stab at it. So in general, if you look at it, there are different kind of products, and there are companies like that. So of course, for Druva or for Arcane, like Druva, it happened little later. Arcane from day one, we needed to have market-facing presence, and there is no other way to build such companies without having the business team, so to say, sales, marketing, based out of US, right? But if you look at a company like Freshdesk, right, they have been able to, so a lot of things are dictated by the nature of the product that we're solving. If it is like, super simple, self-serve, very easily done by, maybe one entity or one division in the company without needing to integrate with others or needing to get blessing and approvals from other departments, those things are probably doable. I mean, there are examples of course, Freshdesk, we all know, there is BrowserStack, there is, Wingify, there is Fish and Charge. So there are companies, out of India who have been able to do it. So again, I don't know the specifics of your product, but you have to look at from those lenses that, what it takes, the product, who will be using it, what are the dependencies, can it be done in a self-serve way, and that will probably, give you the answer.
Jishnu, I think you hit the nail on the head, because I was having that question. I'm ex-Freshdesk and now I am with ProMobile Technologies. So I am a little bullish on inbound sales, as you would assume, because the two things that you said, the two M's, again, those are the really important things. And if we manage to get the two things correct right away, or when we are able to tell a story. So one of them is the message, that actually is your story, why we are doing it and where we want to be. So if you're able to convince everyone that this is the story and this is why we are here, the other is the math. That's where your lead gen comes in. If these two functions work hand in hand, I would believe that inbound sales is the way to go until you start seeing that there is a peak. And when you start seeing the peak, or when is the, from your point of view, what would be the peak, or what would be the point when you then start realizing that now to really hit those big enterprise deals or to go against those big players in the US, I would need to start an office there. Instead of doing it early on, where we could just be doing it inbound. What would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there also it would be very much dependent on the nature of the product. Like one can argue that, let's say for Freshdesk, I mean, we are not investors, so we don't, we are not, we don't know. I mean, I don't have visibility into exact things, but whatever I hear, it seems to me just from just analyzing as a third person that product can go a long way just with inside sales, and it's a question of where it would peak. But look, it depends on the nature of the market you are addressing. If it's a big market product or it's a small SMB focused product, the market still might be huge till you reach a saturation where you would kind of think of going up market. Or let's say now that's one end. But for other companies, if you are starting from, I would say, in Arkin, I can't really think of a scenario where an Arkin kind of product can actually start with inside sales. I mean, you can do some kind of, I would say, MQL, like marketing qualified leads, like some kind of exercise that lets you to qualify the leads, but to be able to close a customer, with inside sales for an Arkin kind of product, no, I can't think of.
Milind, did you hit this scenario of this kind of peak or?
Yeah, so we hit the scenario just as Jishnu described, right? So the initial sales, the SMB mid-market sales could happen through inbound, pure inbound. But once you kind of reach certain scale, at least in our case, it was kind of becoming impossible to scale further without targeting the enterprise. We couldn't really scale our revenue that easily by just going after SMBs, primarily because at least in our case, it happened to be a kind of fragmented market. We couldn't really reach out to them so easily. So at that point, we had to go enterprise, and then marketing and sales function too.
So as member of the Indian startup ecosystem, and we want to play our role, and we get to, we are sometimes fortunate enough to get to work with whoever entrepreneurs we are working with, but we want to make sure that we are accessible, we are heard, and to whatever extent we can be helpful, our collective knowledge that we are gathering by virtue of getting to work with entrepreneurs like Milind and Rohit, we share them, right? And then, of course, by situations, I mean, every situation is different, every company is different, so the entrepreneur would need to kind of get these things and apply it to his or her scenario. So thank you very much, and I have my colleague Puneet here. Puneet is based off our Mumbai office, and he is coming in Pune quite frequently. And as I said that, I mean, we have probably 8 to 9 companies from Pune and also exit. So Pune is a very, I mean, we have been from very beginning, quite active, though we may not have an office here, but quite active in Pune. So we would love to be of help in any whichever way, and potentially, partner with some of you. So.